The engineering bay of the Starbound had been transformed into something that looked like a nightmare. Cables hung from the ceiling like vines in a jungle. Parts from a dozen different systems were scattered across every surface. Holographic displays flickered with equations and diagrams that seemed to change every few seconds. In the middle of it all, Nathan Cole moved like a conductor leading an orchestra, pointing at things and shouting orders while his team scrambled to keep up. Zorath stood in the doorway, afraid to step inside. He had seen many things in his long life. He had visited worlds made entirely of crystal. He had watched stars die and new ones be born. But he had never seen anything quite like this. "This is madness," he said, his mandibles clicking rapidly. "What are they doing?" Lieutenant Amy Chen appeared beside him. She was the ship's navigator, a small woman with long black hair tied back in a practical ponytail. Her eyes were sharp and clever, always watching, always calculating. "They are solving the problem," she said simply. "By destroying the ship? By rebuilding it?" Amy smiled at the alien's confusion. "This is how humans work, Ambassador. We take things apart, we put them back together in new ways. We try things that should not work, and sometimes they do. But the barrier cannot be breached. Every scientist in the galaxy agrees on this. It exists in 17 dimensions at once. There is no technology that can pass through all 17 simultaneously." Amy's smile grew wider. "You are correct. There is no way through 17 dimensions. Then what are they doing? Finding the 18th one." Zorath stared at her. For a long moment he could not speak. Finally, his mandibles clicked in a pattern that meant deep disbelief. There is no 18th dimension. The dimensional structure of reality has been mapped completely. There are exactly 17 dimensions. This is basic physics. It was basic physics, Amy corrected gently. About 6 months ago, a team of human scientists discovered something new. A dimension that no one had ever detected before. It exists at the edges of reality, in the spaces between the other dimensions. We published a paper about it. I never saw any such paper. No one in the council read it. It came from humans. Most species assume that anything we discover must already be known to the older civilizations. Amy shrugged. They are usually wrong. Inside the engineering bay, Nathan was arguing with Katie about something. Their voices were loud, their gestures were wild, and at one point Nathan threw a wrench across the room in frustration. But a few minutes later, they were hugging each other and laughing, apparently having solved whatever problem they had been fighting about. Zorath watched this, with growing horror. Do they always behave this way? When they are excited, yes. Amy led him into the bay, carefully stepping over cables and around piles of equipment. Human creativity often looks like chaos from the outside, but there is a method to it. We think by doing. We learn by failing. We succeed by refusing to stop. They found Captain Daniel Harris near the center of the bay, reviewing a holographic display with Katie. The science officer was talking quickly, her hands moving as she explained something complicated. The barrier was designed to block anything moving through the 17 known dimensions, Katie was saying. It is perfect, absolutely perfect. No species has ever built anything so complete, but it was built 3 million years ago. The architects did not know about the 18th dimension because it had not been discovered yet. So we are not going through the barrier, Daniel said slowly. We are going around it. Through a dimension it does not cover. Katie's eyes were bright with excitement. It is like a wall that stretches from floor to ceiling. Everyone has been trying to break through the wall or climb over it. But if you dig underneath it, if you go through the ground itself, the wall cannot stop you. Can we do it? I have no idea. Probably not. The physics involved are beyond anything we have ever attempted. We would need to completely rebuild the ship's engines to access the 18th dimension. The energy requirements are enormous, The risk of tearing reality apart is very real. Katie paused, then grinned. But it might work. Daniel nodded. Then we try. For the next 72 hours, the crew of the Starbound worked without rest. They slept in shifts, grabbing a few hours here and there before returning to their tasks. They ate while working, meals balanced on top of equipment or held in one hand while the other hand welded circuits together. The ship's coffee supply, usually enough for months of travel, began to run dangerously low. Zorath watched all of this with a mixture of fascination and horror. He had served as an ambassador for over 200 years. He had studied dozens of species, but he had never seen anything like humans when they were focused on a problem. They argued constantly, but their arguments led to solutions. They made mistakes, terrible mistakes that would have discouraged any other species, but they learned from each mistake and kept going. They laughed at their own failures. They celebrated small victories with shouting and hugging. They worked together in ways that seemed completely unorganized, but somehow produced results. On the third day, Nathan called everyone to the engineering bay. "It is done," he announced, gesturing at the mess of machinery around him. "I present to you the most beautiful, most dangerous, most completely insane modification ever made to a starship." The engines of the Starbound had been transformed. They no longer looked like any technology Zorath recognized. Glowing coils wrapped around dark crystals. Energy pulsed through transparent tubes, filled with substances that changed color as he watched. The whole thing hummed with a sound that seemed to exist just at the edge of hearing. "Will it work?" Daniel asked. "Honestly, Captain, I give us about a 30% chance of success. There is a 20% chance that nothing happens at all, a 15% chance that the ship gets torn apart, a 10% chance that we create a small black hole, and a 25% chance of something I cannot even predict." "Those odds are not very good." "No, sir, they are not." Nathan smiled his wild smile. "And as long as there is any chance at all, a human will take it." Daniel looked around at his crew, at Katie, who had not slept in 2 days, but whose eyes were still bright with curiosity, at Amy, calmly running final calculations on her portable display, at the engineers and technicians who had pushed themselves beyond exhaustion to build something impossible, at Zorath, who looked like he was questioning every decision that had led him to this moment. "We came here to do something no one has ever done," Daniel said. "We came here to cross a barrier that has stopped every species in the galaxy for 3,000 years. The Council expected us to fail. The architects built their wall to keep everyone out forever." He straightened his shoulders and walked toward the bridge. "Let us show them what humans can do. No one enters without permission, except humanity." Part 3. Crossing the Threshold. The barrier hung before them like a curtain of living light. It had destroyed entire fleets. It had ended the dreams of civilizations. For 3,000 years, it had stood as the ultimate symbol of what could not be done. Captain Daniel Harris sat in his command chair, his hands steady on the armrests. Around him, the bridge crew worked at their stations with calm focus. There was fear in the air. Everyone could feel it. But there was something stronger than fear, too. There was hope. "All stations report ready," said Katie from the science station. Her voice was quiet but firm. "Navigation locked in," added Amy from her position. "Course is set. The moment we engage the new drive, we will either pass through the 18th dimension and come out on the other side of the barrier. There is nothing in between." "That is not very comforting," Zorath said from his position near the back of the bridge. He had insisted on staying, even though Daniel had offered to let him wait in one of the escape pods. The ambassador wanted to see what happened, even if what happened was terrible. "Comfort was never the goal," Daniel replied. He looked around at his crew one more time. These were good people, brave people. They had followed him across the galaxy, into danger and wonder in equal measure. Whatever happened next, he was proud to serve with them. "Nathan," Daniel said, activating the communication system. "Are you ready down there?" In the engineering bay, Nathan Cole stood, surrounded by the impossible machinery he had built. His hands rested on the main control panel, ready to make adjustments at a moment's notice. His team stood at various stations around him, equally prepared. "Ready as we will ever be, Captain. The drive is stable. Energy levels are at maximum. If this works, it will be the greatest achievement in human engineering history. If it does not work, well, at least we will not be around to feel embarrassed about it." Despite everything, Daniel smiled. "Engaging in 30 seconds. Everyone, hold on to something." The seconds passed slowly. On the view screen, the barrier shimmered and pulsed, beautiful and deadly. Zorath found himself counting his own heartbeats, wondering if these would be his last. 10 seconds, Amy announced. Katie gripped the edges of her console. Her mind was racing through all the calculations one more time, searching for any error she might have missed. There were none. The math was perfect, but perfect math did not always mean perfect results. 5 seconds. Daniel took a deep breath. He thought about Earth, the blue and green world where his species had been born. He thought about all the humans who had come before him, all the dreamers and explorers who had looked at the impossible and refused to look away. He thought about the future, about what humanity might achieve if they could only take this one step. Engaging drive now. The Starbound shuddered. The lights flickered. On every display, numbers began to change rapidly, climbing toward values that should not exist. And then, reality twisted. There was no other way to describe it. The universe folded around them like a piece of paper being bent in half. Colors that had no names flooded the view screen. Sounds that existed outside the range of normal hearing filled the bridge. For one eternal moment, every person on the ship felt themselves stretched across infinity, existing everywhere and nowhere at once. Zorak screamed. His mind, shaped by millions of years of evolution on a world very different from Earth, could not process what was happening. The experience was too strange, too impossible, too much. But the humans did not scream. They watched with wide eyes and racing hearts, but they did not look away. They had trained for this, prepared themselves as best they could for an experience that no one had ever survived before. And something in the human spirit, some ancient inheritance from ancestors who had faced down predators and storms and the endless darkness of prehistoric nights, refused to let them surrender to fear. The twisting stopped. The colors faded. The sounds disappeared. And the Starbound emerged on the other side of the barrier. For a long moment, no one moved. They simply stared at the view screen, trying to understand what they were seeing. The obsidian reach spread before them, a region of space that no living being had seen in 3,000 years. Stars burned in unfamiliar patterns. Nebulae of purple and gold stretched across the darkness. And in the distance, something enormous waited. "We made it," Katie whispered. Her voice was shaking. "We actually made it." "Report," Daniel ordered, his captain's training taking over. "What is our status?" "All systems functioning normally," Amy said, checking her displays. "Navigation is online. We are definitely on the other side of the barrier, approximately 40,000 light-years from our previous position." "Engineering reports no damage," Nathan's voice came through the speakers. "The drive worked perfectly. Better than perfectly, actually. We are already collecting data that will keep human scientists busy for centuries." Zorath finally managed to speak. His voice was weak, his compound eyes unfocused. "That is impossible. What you just did is impossible." "And yet here we are," Daniel said simply. The ambassador pushed himself away from the wall he had been clinging to. He moved slowly toward the view screen, staring at the stars beyond. These were stars that his species had dreamed of seeing for thousands of years. Stars that the Galactic Council had declared forever out of reach. "How?" he asked. "How did you do this?" The barrier was perfect. It was designed by the architects themselves. No species ever found the 18th dimension, Katie said gently. Everyone assumed that reality had been completely mapped. Everyone accepted that 17 dimensions were all there were. But humans, we do not accept limits very well. We keep looking, keep searching, keep asking questions that everyone else has stopped asking. You found a door that no one else knew existed. We found a door that no one else was looking for. A new signal appeared on the communication display. It was faint at first, barely detectable, but it grew stronger with each passing second. The signal was not coming from the barrier behind them or from the stars ahead. It was coming from the enormous structure in the distance. "Captain," Amy said, her voice suddenly tense, "we are being scanned. Something is examining our ship, our systems, everything about us." "Shields?" Daniel asked. "Would be pointless. Whatever is scanning us is using technology so advanced that our shields might as well not exist." The signal changed. It was no longer just a scan. It was a message. "I am receiving a transmission," Katie said. It is in a language I have never seen before." The computer is trying to translate, but it is unlike anything in the galactic database. The structure is completely alien. "Let me hear it," Daniel ordered. The sound that filled the bridge was strange and haunting. It was music and mathematics and something else entirely, woven together in ways that human minds could barely follow. But the translation software, designed by a species that had learned to communicate with whales and dolphins and even artificial intelligences, slowly began to make sense of it. Words appeared on the main display, simple words that carried the weight of ages. "You have entered." "How?" Daniel stood from his chair and walked toward the view screen. The massive structure in the distance seemed to pulse with light, as if awakening from a long sleep. "We found a way," he said, though he did not know if his words were being transmitted. "We come in peace." The response came after a long pause, the alien language translated into text that glowed against the darkness of space. "Come, the architects will speak with you." Katie gasped. Amy's hands froze over her controls. Even Nathan, listening from the engineering bay, went silent. The architects were not gone. They had been here all along, waiting for someone to finally reach them. And humanity was about to be the first species in 3,000 years to meet them face to face. No one enters without permission, except humanity. Part 4, the Architect's Test. The station grew larger as the Starbound approached. It was not a station, Daniel realized. It was a city. A city built in space, floating among the stars, constructed from materials that human science could not identify. Black metal that seemed to absorb light. Crystal spires that glowed with inner fire. Structures that defied gravity and logic, twisting in ways that made the eyes hurt to follow. "The size is incredible," Katie whispered, her instruments struggling to measure what was before them. "It is larger than some moons. The energy readings are off every scale we have. This is technology millions of years beyond anything in the galaxy." A hangar door opened in the side of the station, large enough to swallow the Starbound 100 times over. Lights flickered inside, guiding them forward. "They want us to dock," Amy said. Daniel nodded slowly. "Take us in." Slowly. The ship moved through the opening and into a vast chamber filled with strange machinery and soft light. As soon as they were inside, the hangar door closed behind them. Scanners showed a breathable atmosphere forming around the ship. Gravity stabilized to comfortable Earth levels. "They know what we need to survive," Nathan's voice came through the speakers. They adjusted the environment for us. That means they scanned us completely. They know everything about human biology now. Should we be worried? Zorath asked. Probably, Daniel admitted. But we did not come this far to stop now. Lieutenant Chen, you have the bridge. Lieutenant Moore, Chief Cole, and Security Officer Brooks, you are with me. Ryan Brooks was already waiting at the airlock when Daniel arrived. He was a quiet man with careful eyes and hands that were never far from his weapon. He had served with Daniel for 10 years, through more dangerous situations than either of them liked to count. Are we sure about this, Captain? Ryan asked as they prepared to exit the ship. Not at all, Daniel replied. But when has that ever stopped us? The airlock opened, and they stepped onto the floor of the alien hangar. The air smelled strange, like ozone and flowers, and something else that none of them could identify. Their footsteps echoed in the vast space, the sound traveling far before fading into silence. Zorath had insisted on joining them, despite Daniel's suggestion that he stay behind. The ambassador moved close to the human group, his compound eyes darting nervously in every direction. He had never felt so small in his entire life. A light appeared in the distance, moving toward them. As it grew closer, they saw that it was not just a light. A creature made of flowing energy and shifting matter, towering 12 feet tall, its form never quite stable, never quite solid. The architect stopped a few meters away from them. For a long moment, it simply observed, studying the small group of creatures that had somehow crossed the barrier that had kept everyone else out. Then it spoke. The sound did not come from any mouth or speaker. It resonated directly in their minds, words forming without passing through ears. In 3,000 years, the architect said, 407 species have attempted to breach our barrier. Daniel stepped forward, keeping his voice calm and respectful. We know. We read the records. The Velthari sent their greatest fleet. They believed that enough firepower could break through any defense. They were wrong. Their ships were erased from existence before they could even reach the barrier's surface. Katie shifted uncomfortably. She had read about the Velthari attempt. Thousands of ships, millions of lives, all gone in an instant. The Kryn spent 3 generations building a weapon of pure destruction. They believed that enough power could overcome any obstacle. They were wrong. The barrier absorbed their weapon and grew stronger. We read about that too, Nathan said quietly. The Moldathi tried trickery, the Vexon tried negotiation, the Primari tried prayer. The architect paused, its form flickering through colors that had no names. All of them failed. All of them approached the barrier as an obstacle to be defeated, an enemy to be conquered, a problem to be solved through force or cleverness or desperation. And us? Daniel asked. What did we do differently? The architect's form settled, becoming almost stable for the first time since it had appeared. When it spoke again, there was something in its voice that might have been surprise. Or perhaps respect. You did not try to defeat the barrier. You did not try to overpower it, or trick it, or beg it for entry. You simply found another way. You discovered something new. You went around the problem instead of through it. The 18th dimension, Katie said softly. Yes, a dimension that we ourselves did not know existed when we built the barrier. A dimension that has been hiding at the edges of reality for billions of years, waiting for someone curious enough to find it. The architect moved closer, its form bending down to study the humans more carefully. Zorath stepped back, but Daniel held his ground. We did not build the barrier to keep people out, the architect continued. We built it as a test of thinking, a test of creativity. Every species in this galaxy evolved through competition. They learned to survive by being stronger, faster, more aggressive than their rivals. When they saw our barrier, they saw an enemy. They tried to defeat it the same way they had defeated every other enemy in their history. But we did not see it that way, Daniel said slowly, beginning to understand. You saw a puzzle, a question, a challenge to your curiosity, not your strength. You asked not how to beat the barrier, but how to avoid the need to beat it entirely. The architect straightened, its form flickering with what might have been approval. In 3,000 years, you are the first species to think that way. Nathan laughed, a short burst of surprised joy. All those other species were trying to prove they were powerful. We just wanted to see what was on the other side. Exactly. Your species is young. You have been among the stars for barely 2 centuries. You have no great fleets, no ancient wisdom, no power that would impress any of the older civilizations. But you have something none of them have. You have the ability to think differently. To ask questions that others have stopped asking. To look at the universe not as something to be conquered, but as something to be understood. Zorath finally found his voice. Why? Why build a test at all? What was the purpose? The architect turned to look at the alien ambassador. Its gaze was heavy, weighted with millions of years of existence. We grew tired. We had explored everything, learned everything, built everything. The universe held no more mysteries for us, and without mystery, existence became empty. So we decided to wait, to sleep, to let the barriers stand, until someone worthy came to wake us. Worthy of what? Daniel asked. Worthy of inheriting what we left behind. Worthy of receiving the knowledge we gathered over millions of years. Technology that could reshape stars. Medical science that could extend life indefinitely. Energy sources that could power civilizations forever. We could not take it with us when we moved beyond this reality. So we left it here, waiting for the right species to claim it. The humans looked at each other. The weight of what the architect was saying settled over them like a heavy blanket. They had come looking for discovery. They had found something far greater. You are offering all of this to us? Katie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We are offering you a choice, the architect replied. The knowledge is yours to take. But what you do with it afterward is up to you. You can keep it for yourselves and become the most powerful species in the galaxy. Or you can share it and lift all species to a higher level. Daniel looked at his crew, at Katie, whose eyes were bright with the promise of unlimited knowledge, at Nathan, who was already imagining what he could build with architect technology, at Ryan, who understood the responsibility that came with such power, at Zorath, who was staring at the humans with an expression of complete shock. How long do we have to decide? Daniel asked. The architect's form flickered once more. As long as you need. We have waited 3,000 years. We can wait a little longer. No one enters without permission, except humanity. Part 5. The Invitation. The architect led them deeper into the station, through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, and chambers filled with wonders that made even Nathan speechless. They saw machines that manipulated gravity like water. They saw gardens where plants grew in colors that human eyes had never evolved to see. They saw libraries of knowledge stored in crystals that could hold more information than every computer humanity had ever built combined. And everywhere they went, the architect spoke of what could be done with these gifts. This device can heal any disease, it said, gesturing toward a small sphere that pulsed with gentle light. Every illness that has ever plagued any species in this galaxy could be cured within a generation. This power source, it continued, showing them a column of contained energy that seemed to fold in on itself endlessly, could provide unlimited clean energy to 1,000 worlds. No more fighting over resources, no more environmental destruction, no more poverty born from scarcity. Katie was crying. She did not realize it at first, but tears were streaming down her face as she tried to absorb the meaning of what she was seeing. These were not just technologies. These were solutions. Answers to problems that had caused suffering across the galaxy for millions of years. Why did you not share this before? She asked, her voice thick with emotion. All those species that tried to breach the barrier, all those civilizations that failed the test. They could have saved so many lives. The architect paused, its form growing still. We considered it, it admitted. For many centuries, we debated whether to simply give our knowledge to all species freely. But we had seen what happened when power was given to those who were not ready for it. Wars, destruction, the elevation of the strong over the weak. Species that thought only of conquest would use our gifts to conquer more effectively. Species that thought only of themselves would hoard the knowledge and let others suffer. So you waited for someone different, Daniel said. We waited for someone who would ask the right questions. Someone who would approach the universe with curiosity instead of aggression. Someone who would see our barrier not as a challenge to their strength, but as an invitation to think in new ways. The architect turned to face Daniel directly. We waited for you. The weight of that statement settled over the group. Ryan, who had been silent throughout the tour, finally spoke. What happens now? You said we have a choice. Keep the knowledge for ourselves, or share it with everyone. What do you think we should do? That is not for us to say. The choice must be yours alone. We can tell you only this. The decision you make will define your species forever. It will determine whether humanity is remembered as the species that hoarded the stars, or the species that lifted all others to the light. Daniel walked to one of the large windows that looked out over the Obsidian Reach. Stars burned in the darkness, countless worlds orbiting them, countless species looking up at those same stars and wondering what mysteries they held. He thought about Earth, about the long history of his people, about all the choices that had brought humanity to this moment. Humans had not always made the right choices. They had wars in their past, cruelty, selfishness, all the dark chapters that came with being an imperfect species. But they also had something else. They had the capacity to grow, to learn, to become better than they were. When humans first developed nuclear power, Daniel said quietly, some wanted to use it only for weapons. Others wanted to keep it secret, to give their nations an advantage over rivals. But in the end, we shared the knowledge. We built power plants that gave electricity to millions. We used the technology to advance medicine and science and exploration. He turned back to face the architect. When we developed the cure for cancer, we did not sell it to the highest bidder. We gave it to everyone. When we discovered faster-than-light travel, we did not keep it for ourselves. We shared the technology with every species that wanted it. Some might say that was foolish, the architect observed. You could have been the dominant power in the galaxy by now. And what would be the point of that? Daniel asked. What good is being powerful if you are alone? What joy is there in standing at the top of a mountain if everyone else is struggling in the valley below? He looked at his crew, at the people who had followed him across an impossible barrier into the unknown. Katie nodded, her eyes still wet, but her expression determined. Nathan grinned his wild grin. Ryan stood steady and calm. Even Zorath, the alien who had expected them to fail, looked at them with something approaching understanding. We are not perfect, Daniel said. Humans have made mistakes. We will probably make more. But we have always tried to reach out rather than close in. We have always believed that the universe is better when we explore it together. He straightened his shoulders and faced the architect directly. We will share the knowledge. All of it. With every species in the galaxy. We will not keep any of it for ourselves alone. That is our choice. The architect was silent for a long moment. Then its form began to change, shifting and flowing, until it seemed almost human, almost familiar. In 3 million years, it said softly, we met many species. We studied them. We tested them. We tried to find someone worthy of carrying on our work. but none of them ever made the choice you just made. What choice did they make? Katie asked. They never got this far. The few that reached this station, before we created the barrier, chose to keep whatever they could carry for themselves. They fought over scraps of our technology while ignoring the greater gifts we offered. They could not see past their own immediate desires. The architect moved toward Daniel, extending what might have been a hand. You are the first species to choose sharing over hoarding, cooperation over competition, the future of all over the advancement of one. Perhaps in the end, this is what we were really testing for. Daniel took the offered hand. It felt strange, like touching solid light, but it also felt warm, welcoming. What happens now? He asked. Now the barrier falls. Now the knowledge flows. Now every species in the galaxy will know that humanity was the one who opened the door. The architect's form flickered with what might have been a smile. And now at last, we can move on. Our long watch is over. Our purpose is complete. The future is in your hands. The light in the station began to change, growing brighter, warmer. Throughout the structure, systems that had been dormant for 3,000 years began to activate. Data streams started flowing outward, carrying the accumulated wisdom of millions of years toward every corner of the galaxy. The barrier around the Obsidian Reach flickered and disappeared, opening the region to all who wished to enter. And somewhere, in the endless depths of space, the architects began their final journey, moving beyond the physical universe into whatever lay beyond. 3 weeks later, the Starbound returned to Galactic Council space. They were met by thousands of ships from hundreds of species, all gathered to see the humans who had done the impossible. Zorath stood beside Daniel on the bridge as they approached the great space station where the council met. Everything has changed, the ambassador said quietly. The knowledge you brought back is already transforming our civilization. Diseases are being cured. Energy shortages are ending. Technologies that will take centuries to fully understand are being distributed freely to all who want them. And is the council upset that we gave it all away? Daniel asked. Zorath made a sound that might have been a laugh. Some are. The powerful always resent when their power is diminished, but most are grateful, and even those who resent you cannot deny what you accomplished. He turned to face Daniel directly. I was wrong about your species. I thought you were children playing at being adults. I thought you would fail the test like everyone else. But you did not just pass the test. You changed the rules of the game entirely. Daniel smiled. That is what humans do. We look at the rules and we ask why they have to be that way. We look at walls and we ask what is on the other side. We look at impossible things and we ask how to make them possible. The council station loomed before them, lights blazing in welcome. For the first time in galactic history, humanity was not the youngest species at the table. They were the ones who had opened the door to a new future. Zorath clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. One thing still puzzles me. The architects said they waited for a species that would think differently. A species that would choose cooperation over competition. How did you know that was the right choice? How did you know to share the knowledge instead of keeping it? Daniel looked out at the stars, at the infinite expanse of possibility that stretched before them. We did not know, he admitted. We never do. But we have always believed that we are better together than apart, that the universe is too big and too strange and too wonderful to explore alone. That the best thing you can do when you reach the top of a mountain is to help others climb it too. He smiled, the same smile that had launched ships and crossed barriers and changed the course of galactic history. No one enters without permission. That was the rule for 3,000 years. But humans have never been very good at following rules, especially rules that tell us to stay out. The Starbound moved forward, into the light, into the future, carrying the hopes of a species that had always reached for the stars. And now, at last, the stars were reaching back. The stars had always called to humanity. From the first moment an ancient human looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there, the species had been driven by a hunger to explore, to discover, to know. 200 years ago, they had finally answered that call. They built ships that could cross the vast emptiness between stars. They met other species. They joined a galaxy that was older and stranger than they had ever imagined. And now, Captain Daniel Harris stood on the bridge of the Earth vessel Starbound, staring at something that was supposed to be impossible to cross. The Obsidian Reach stretched before them, hidden behind a wall of shimmering energy that bent light and space itself. The barrier was beautiful in a terrifying way. It glowed with colors that human eyes could barely process, shifting and pulsing like a living thing. For 3,000 years, this barrier had stood unbroken. Every species in the known galaxy had tried to pass through it. Every single one had failed. Daniel was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many wonders to be surprised by anything anymore. He had commanded the Starbound for 15 years, leading his crew through diplomatic missions, rescue operations, and the occasional conflict. But this mission was different. This mission was supposed to be impossible. "Captain, I am picking up the same energy readings as before," said Lieutenant Katie Moore from her station. She was the ship's science officer, a young woman with short brown hair and a mind that never stopped asking questions. "The barrier is stable. No fluctuations. No weak points." Daniel nodded slowly. He had expected as much. The reports from the Galactic Council had been clear. The barrier around the Obsidian Reach was perfect. It existed in 17 different dimensions at once. It could not be broken, bypassed, or tricked. Ships that touched it simply ceased to exist. "The Velthari tried for 600 years, said a clicking voice from behind them. Ambassador Zorath stood near the back of the bridge, watching the humans with his 4 compound eyes. He was a tall insectoid being with a hard shell of dark blue and mandibles that clicked when he spoke. He had been sent by the Galactic Council to observe this mission, though everyone knew the real reason. He was there to watch humanity fail. "They sent their greatest scientists," Zorath continued, "their most advanced ships. They lost thousands of lives trying to breach that barrier. The Kryn spent 3 generations building a weapon powerful enough to punch through it. The weapon worked perfectly. The barrier absorbed it like it was nothing." "We have read the reports," Daniel said calmly. "Then you understand that this is pointless." Zorath's mandibles clicked in what humans had learned to recognize as frustration. "Your species has been traveling among the stars for barely 2 centuries. You are children compared to the rest of us. The Council only approved this mission because they assumed you would fail quickly and learn your place." Daniel turned to look at the alien ambassador. There was no anger in his eyes, only a quiet confidence that Zorath found deeply unsettling. "We understand perfectly," Daniel said, "and we appreciate the Council giving us this chance." Zorath made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You appreciate being sent to die?" "We appreciate being told something is impossible." Daniel smiled slightly. "It gives us something to work with." The bridge was silent for a moment. Katie exchanged a look with the other crew members. They all knew what the captain meant. They had all grown up hearing the same stories. The history of humanity was filled with moments just like this one. Moments when someone said that something could not be done, and humans did it anyway. Flight was impossible, until 2 brothers built a machine with wings. Breaking the sound barrier would kill any pilot, until someone flew faster than sound, and lived. Reaching the moon was a fantasy, until humans walked on its surface. Faster than light travel was against the laws of physics, until human scientists found a way around those laws. Every single time, the universe had said no. Every single time, humanity had found a way to say yes. "Lieutenant Moore," Daniel said, turning back to the view screen. "Tell me about the architects." Katie pulled up the information on her display. The architects were an ancient species that existed over 3 million years ago. They built structures across the galaxy, including the barrier around the Obsidian Reach. According to Council records, they vanished about 3,000 years ago. Some theories suggest they evolved beyond physical form. Others believe they destroyed themselves. The most popular theory is that they simply left this galaxy for somewhere else. And what is inside the Obsidian Reach? Unknown. No probe, no ship, no signal has ever made it past the barrier and returned. The Council has classified the entire region as forbidden space. Any species that attempts to enter without permission from the architects is violating galactic law. Permission from the species that no longer exists, Daniel said quietly. Yes, sir. Daniel stared at the barrier for a long moment. It was beautiful and terrible. A wall built by beings so advanced that modern civilizations could barely understand their technology. Everyone in the galaxy had accepted that it could not be crossed. Everyone had given up. But humans were not very good at giving up. Chief Engineer Cole, Daniel said, pressing the communication button on his chair. Please report to the bridge. A few minutes later, Nathan Cole walked through the door. He was a large man with thick arms covered in old burn scars from years of working with dangerous machinery. His face was rough and unshaven, and his eyes had the slightly wild look of someone who spent too much time thinking about things that should not be possible. Captain, Nathan said, looking at the barrier on the view screen. That is one beautiful problem. Can you solve it? Daniel asked. Nathan studied the shimmering wall of energy for a long moment. He scratched his chin. He tilted his head to one side. Then he smiled, a wide grin that made Zorath take a nervous step backward. I have absolutely no idea, Nathan said cheerfully, but I cannot wait to try. Zorath clicked his mandibles in confusion. You are happy that you do not know how to solve this? Nathan turned to look at the alien ambassador. Friend, if I already knew how to do it, where would be the fun in that? He walked over to Katie's station and began pulling up data on the barrier. The science officer moved aside to give him room, and soon the two of them were deep in conversation, throwing around terms and theories that made Zorath's head hurt. Daniel watched his crew work, feeling a familiar warmth in his chest. This was what humanity did best. They faced the impossible, and they refused to look away. The barrier had stood for 3,000 years. It was time to see how much longer it could last.